Given how much time goes into planning, writing, and shooting a TV show, you might think that everything we see on screen is completely intentional. However, while for the most part TV shows run to script, there have been some great instances where things didn't quite go as planned. No one catches a mistake and it slips through, or there isn't the time or budget to fix things. We've seen crew members appearing in TV shows because of aspect ratio changes, messy CGI, and extras doing all kinds of weird shit. But generally, these are only discovered when the product makes it to air. Sometimes though, a show goes off script and it is noticed ahead of time, but it is left in intentionally. Other times, what might look like a mistake was very much deliberate all along. With all that in mind, I'm Will from WhatCulture.com, and this is 10 TV mistakes that were totally intentional. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to stay notified. Ding, ding, done. Number 10, the car door, Breaking Bad. The 8th episode of Breaking Bad's second season, Better Call Saul, is mostly remembered for introducing the character who gave it that title. But while the first appearance of Saul Goodman is brilliant, there was a moment during filming that wasn't all good, man. When Jesse and Walt are trying to make a quick getaway from the cops, the car door jams when Jesse is trying to open it. Despite how detail-oriented the show was and the often meticulous vision of Vince Gilligan, this was purely accidental and the door actually jammed during the shoot. It worked so well, however, and added to the drama so brilliantly that Gilligan decided to leave the take in. Number 9, The Diner, Twin Peaks: The Return. Twin Peaks: The Return was many things, a brilliant, bizarre, and baffling sequel to one of TV's most influential shows. One thing it wasn't, though, is accidental. David Lynch had complete control, directing all 18 episodes, and there isn't a shot in there that he didn't design in that marvelous mind of his. In part 7 then, there's a strange moment in the Double R diner at the very end. We're presented with one scene in the diner before someone runs in and yells, and the scene completely changes with all the customers replaced. Many wondered at the time if this was a continuity error, which is what it appears to be. But you can also notice Norma briefly look up as though realizing something is amiss. Given what happens later in the season with the different dimensions, we can safely assume that Lynch was seeding the idea right here. Number 8, Frasier. In a flub from Frasier that results in a brilliant scene between him and Niles, this scene sees the two brothers talking about how picky Frasier is with women, at which point he calls himself a fault-finding, flaw-fleeing Flasier.
I may have walked in here, the old fault-finding, flaw-fleeing Frasier, but I leave a man...
Without missing a beat, Niles calls him out on the error, which Frasier then denies, and it leads into a classic bit of squabbling between the two. Kelsey Grammer actually completely messed up his original line. He was indeed supposed to say Frasier, before David Pierce quickly ad-libbed the response, and the result was so good that the director of the episode decided to keep it in. Number 7, Ian Glenn's Dothraki, Game of Thrones. Ian Glenn is an excellent actor, with his performance one of the more understatedly great on Game of Thrones, but what he is not is a native Dothraki speaker. While the made-up language has over 3,000 words in its dictionary courtesy of creator David Peterson, it was still a little short in Season 2 when they needed something to fit the line, "Take all the gold and jewels." They sent for an emergency translation from Peterson, but it didn't arrive in time, meaning that Glenn ended up having to ad-lib the line, which in turn had to be retroactively worked into the Dothraki language. Glenn's line, which I won't even try to pronounce, now means the loose valuables are for loading, with Peterson getting around the fact that it doesn't make complete sense thanks to the fact that Jorah wasn't a native Dothraki speaker. Number 6, Hartnell's flubbed lines, Doctor Who. Doctor Who still doesn't have the largest budget, but it's Game of Thrones-esque when compared to what it had to work with way back in 1963. The constraints on the show meant that there wasn't time to combat mistakes, which included the performance of First Doctor William Hartnell. The actor made so many flubs that they couldn't possibly redo the scenes, and eventually co-star William Russell got so good at riffing on the mistakes that it was written into the script that Hartnell would mispronounce something. Number 5, Kelso hurts himself. That 70s show. Michael Kelso, played by Ashton Kutcher, was slightly dumb, very handsome, and incredibly clumsy. But while the first two were a result of how the character was initially written and casting Kutcher in the role, the latter came about by accident. In The Best Christmas Ever, Kelso runs over to Laurie and attempts to hurdle the couch, but instead trips and hurts his knee on the coffee table, almost smashing the punch bowl that was on it at the time. Kutcher, however, was able to keep a straight face and go on with the scene, and his commitment to doing that became a part of the character that would resurface many times over the years. Kutcher laughing during circles was also an accidental contribution to the character, because Kutcher broke down the first time it happened and it fit so perfectly they decided to make it a running joke. Number 4, the one where Ross takes the Rachel. Friends. Ross mistakenly saying "take the Rachel" instead of Emily is one of the most famous cliffhangers in sitcom history, and feels very much calculated to hook viewers in. The story of Ross making the error, however, comes from David Schwimmer's actual mistakes beforehand. The actor had mixed up the names of the two women in the show previously, albeit for a far less important moment, and it stuck with the writers so much that they were inspired to write it into the wedding itself, turning a simple mistake into a tantalizing cliffhanger watched by nearly 20 million people. Number 3. Giles corpsing Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The season 6 finale of Buffy the Vampire Slayer Grave is, as the title suggests, a pretty serious episode, with Willow intent on ending the world. It's during this installment that Buffy attempts to have a serious chat with Giles, opening up to her former watcher about Xander leaving Anya and her becoming a demon again, Dawn stealing, herself having to work at the Double Meat Palace, and the fact that she's been sleeping with Spike. It takes a lot for Buffy to admit that last part, and Giles' response is to break down laughing. Anthony Stewart Head tries his best to contain his laughter before just going with it, and somehow they manage to style it out as a fitting response for Giles to have at the point where it makes it in to the final edit. Number 2. Killer Bob, Twin Peaks. There are some mistakes that have very little bearing on things. In Twin Peaks, Lynch left in line flubs and mistakes to add to the general oddness of the show, but this one ended up completely changing the entire series. When filming the pilot, the face of Frank Silver, a set worker, accidentally appeared in the mirror during a shot of Sarah Palmer screaming. Lynch liked the look of Silver so much that he decided to cast him as the malevolent spirit Killer Bob, thus creating one of the creepiest TV villains in movie history. Number 1. The Car Won't Start, Seinfeld. The parking garage, which arrived when Seinfeld was really going up a level in quality, remains one of the sitcom's finest half hours. The plot centers around the gang trying to find a car in a multi-story car park, which ends up taking hours. When they finally do reach the car and get inside, that was supposed to be the end of the episode, with them simply driving off. However, when they went to film it, the car really wouldn't start, a situation so perfectly fitting of Seinfeld that they ended up going with it in the finished product. And there you have it, folks, 10 TV mistakes that were totally intentional. Don't forget to leave a comment with your own thoughts down below, as well as like, share, subscribe, and visit whatculture.com for daily news and articles. This is Will for What Culture, and thanks for watching.